Assalamu alaikum. This is Hena Zuberi, and you're watching Muslim Network News. Our top story today is from the Climate Change Summit. President Biden today announced cutting U.S. greenhouse gas pollution by 50 to 52% by 2030. He was addressing a virtual global summit on climate change. The summit is attended by 40 world leaders, including Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping. Biden's announcement was welcomed by German Chancellor Angela Merkel. I'm delighted to see that the United States is back, Merkel said. Next, the No Ban Act. The United States House of Representatives has passed the No Ban Act. The bill limits the president's ability to restrict the entry into the United States of a class of aliens. It will prevent any future leader from instituting something like former US President Donald Trump's 2017 Muslim ban. This restricted immigration from 7 Muslim majority countries. 2 Muslim congresspersons, Rashida Tlaib from Michigan and Andre Carson from Indiana, welcomed the passage of the bill. Tlaib said it sends a loud and clear message to every Muslim and African person in America and around the world that they are welcome in the country. The bill passed on partisan lines with 218 to 208 votes. Republicans largely opposed it while Democrats mostly supported it. President Joe Biden lifted Trump's Muslim ban on his first day in office in January, as he had promised during his presidential campaign. Los Angeles must now provide homes to homeless living on Skid Row by October 18th. U.S. District Judge David Carter criticized the city's handling of homelessness in a 110-page brief. His order came in response to a lawsuit by citizens and homeless advocates. The lawsuit was an initiative of a broader coalition called the LA Alliance for Human Rights. Covering 50 city blocks in downtown Los Angeles, Skid Row is the largest concentration of homeless people in the United States. About 4,000 people live in this part of the city in tents, including many artists. Hospitals and law enforcement agencies were dumping homeless people there. In the meanwhile, Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti has vowed to dedicate $1 billion towards homelessness. An estimated 5 homeless people die every day, according to data from the Los Angeles Homeless Service Authority. Coverage of the trial and conviction of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin for killing George Floyd was split on ideological lines in the United States. Media outlets like CNN, MSNBC, and CNBC, who were considered mainstream and centrist, covered the trial and verdict with a focus on Floyd and the Black community. They featured interviews and commentary from Floyd's family, as well as prominent Black community leaders like Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson. In contrast, conservative-leaning media like Newsmax and Fox News limited coverage of the verdict. They also almost exclusively featured white pundits criticizing the trial's proceedings. This included Tucker Carlson of Fox, who falsely claimed that the Floyd murder is disputed by a majority of Americans. According to a US Today Ipsos poll conducted just hours after the verdict in the case was given on Tuesday, over 70% polled said they agreed with the guilty verdict. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison oversaw the prosecution of the case. He came to national prominence as the first U.S. Muslim congressman. Now, a story about fasting and fighting for justice. Muslims in Minneapolis are balancing fighting for justice and fasting this Ramadan. This year, Ramadan, a month devoted to fasting, prayer, charity, and reflection, began on April 13th, exactly 1 week before the verdict in the trial of Derek Chauvin. Fasting Muslims in Minneapolis gathered around the Muslim-owned store in front of which Floyd was killed to hear the verdict and celebrated after it was announced. Chauvin is the former Minneapolis police officer found guilty of murdering George Floyd. The killing sparked historic protests across the United States against racism and police brutality. A number of Muslims also attended protests for Dante Wright, a 20-year-old black man fatally shot in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, by a police officer on April 11th. Muslim leaders throughout the country have welcomed the verdict. After Muslims in Minneapolis, let's talk about Muslims in Texas. Texan Muslims are pushing a bill to create a more inclusive calendar for government employees. Texas Muslims believe government employees should have days off for Islamic holidays. It's about recognizing and affirming our fellow Texans that celebrate these holidays, stated Representative Joe Moody, the El Paso Democrat who sponsored the bill. She told the Texas Tribune, any system we have should affirm and uplift people to practice their faith, to live their faith, and that shouldn't stop at the Judeo Christian faith tradition. Houston, in the red state of Texas, is rated the most diverse city in America by finance website Wallet Hub. It released its report on 2021's most diverse cities in America recently. 12 mega donors accounted for about $1 for every $13 in federal politics between 2009 and 2020. 6 Democratic donors and 6 Republican donors gave a combined of $3.4 billion in contribution, a new report shows. This analysis was issued by Washington-based group Issue One using campaign finance data. CEO Nick Panamon said that the numbers indicated alarming influence of just a handful of wealthy mega donors on America's political system. He warned that this erodes American democracy by creating an elite donor class that elected officials are beholden to, instead of a system of government by the people, for the people. U.S. Senator Ed Markey and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez reintroduced the Green New Deal on Tuesday. The plan was originally introduced 2 years ago as a progressive public policy wish list to address climate change as well as job creation and to reduce economic inequality. It's set as a goal for the United States to take a leadership role in helping the planet reach net zero emissions by 2050. The aim was to do this by greatly reducing America's dependence on fossil fuels, as well as creating high paying green energy jobs. However, the Republican controlled Senate did not allow it to move forward. This time, the elements of this non binding resolution are showing up in different bills. However, hurdles are still expected, as bills would require 10 Republican senators to approve before they can become law. Russian forces number at 120,000 on the Ukrainian border. Reuters reports that the U.S. is considering shipping more weapons to Ukraine amidst the buildup. Signs of war are all around. This is going to be a big test for President Biden, who's more focused on the domestic agenda. Bangladesh has arrested hundreds of Muslim leaders over protests against the visit by Indian leader Modi. A teenager was also arrested for composing music mocking the Indian Prime Minister and the Bangladeshi Prime Minister Hasina Wajid. A non-political organization, Hifazat-e-Islam, organized countrywide protests against the visit of the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Bangladesh last month. They accused India's Hindu nationalist leader for discrimination against minorities, particularly Muslims, in his country. In the meantime, the U.S. Commission for Religious Freedom has declared India a country of particular concern. This is the second time in a row that this bipartisan U.S. Commission has designated India a country of particular concern. Human rights organizations such as Justice for All, which are led by Muslims, have welcomed the designation but asked the commissioners to engage the State Department based on their recommendations. Public anger is growing day by day in Lebanon. For more than 1 year, Lebanese are protesting on the streets. More details in this report by Ali Khalaf and Saliha Farouk.
Almost a year after the devastating explosion in Beirut that killed at least 200 people, Lebanon is still in disarray. The pandemic, accompanied by unprecedented economic hardship, has sent tens of thousands of people into poverty. Political parties are now preparing for the worst-case scenario. Hezbollah is forming a state within a state, issuing ration cards for food, importing medicine, and storing fuel. These steps highlight rising fears of an implosion in the Lebanese state. Lebanon also faces a serious deterioration in its security situation. Robberies are up 57%, with people trying to steal food, baby formula, or medicine. The murder rate has also jumped to 91% in the span of a year.
Our special Ramadan report today is about our holy book. As it is Ramadan, let's learn why Muslims focus so much on our holy book, the Quran. Here is a report by Ali Khalaf and Saleha Farouk.
The Quran was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad during the month of Ramadan. Therefore, Ramadan and the Quran go together. The Holy Quran consists of 30 parts. Muslims usually read one part a day during the month of Ramadan. The Quran is the same all around the world. Whereas there are thousands of translations, Quran in Arabic is the same. The Quran was preserved primarily by memorization. Each generation helped the next to memorize words of the Quran. Most Muslims memorize some portions of the Quran for their prayers. However, there are millions of Muslims of all ages, genders, and regions who have memorized the entire Quran. They are called Hafiz. During Ramadan, these Hafiz recite the whole Quran for the rest of the congregation in mosques around the world. Reciting the Quran during Ramadan is not compulsory, but Muslims love to do it.
Up next on Muslim Network News is our in-depth analysis segment. We'll be right back after these messages.
So it's nothing extraordinary what we do. It's just a human to human, like brothers to brothers and sisters to sisters. Nothing else, nothing more.
Our fellow Americans.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans.
And soon, they will be available to everyone.
The science is clear. These vaccines will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
They could save your life.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
That's the first step to ending the pandemic and moving our country forward. It's up to you.
We are Justice for All. Headquartered in the heart of downtown Chicago, Justice for All is a global humanitarian initiative dedicated to raising awareness for human rights concerns impacting vulnerable minority groups. Our diverse team of staff and volunteers, led by Imam Malik Mujahid, work tirelessly to help Justice for All achieve their goals. We promote policies that protect religious freedom, address the root causes of mass displacement, and recognize the plight of refugees and forced migrants. Together, we can continue to stand up for justice. justice for all.
Welcome back. France has adopted more sweeping measures that marginalize and seek to control the lives of the French Muslim community. The latest is banning prayers in university corridors. Other measures include prohibiting girls under 18 from wearing the hijab in public places, as well as intervening in mosque operations and the associations responsible for their administration, and controlling the finances of Muslim non-government organizations. To discuss this further, we're going to go to our Chicago studios where Dr. Amina Al-Din will give an in-depth analysis.
Thank you, Hena Zuberi. I am talking today about what is becoming a perennial problem, and that is Muslim women and their scarves. And frankly, I'm quite tired of the conversation. But the thing about this latest effort on the part of the conservative Senate to ban females under 18 from wearing a head covering and whatever it is they wear at the swimming pool has me perplexed, because in addition, it's always been sexist. And France is wants to not be known for sexist political policies. Anti-religion creeps up every now and then. But in order to help me sort out these things, I have Yasser Loueti, who is a French human rights and civil liberties advocate, a community organizer, and political analyst. I hope he can help me sort through this because it is very confusing. How are you today?
Fine, and you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, start sorting, start explaining what is going on. France is always in the news.
Well, I wish I could come on your show and speak of good news happening in France. The problem is there is an obsession in France about the normalization of the Muslim presence. So, of course, this normalization means Muslims are part of the everyday citizenry. They are part of the background, the landscape, and the fact that they dare to exist as citizens and to show their adherence to both their French identity, their Muslim identity, their African identity for many of us. That becomes a problem because for a very long time, French elites were accustomed to Muslims from the post-colonial immigration to just be invisible, to be just statistics, and to be spoken of. Today, they're there to say, I am somebody, I exist, and therefore, I demand that my rights are respected. And what we can call a crisis of normalization of Islam in France is now leading to this wave or this new wave of repression in the form of exceptional laws specifically targeting Muslims and more specifically again Muslim women, because the headscarf is indeed a historic French obsession. Either the Muslim woman who wears it needs to be saved from herself, her father, her brother, her husband, her whatever, and if she dares to say this is my choice, then she becomes the culprit upon which the government is attempting to crack down.
Well, let me ask you this. Is the same kind of crackdown happening to Orthodox Jewish women? Oh, I don't know, Greek or other Catholic or Orthodox women who wear scarves on their heads?
Today, no. Yesterday, yes. We have to remember that France was the only country in Europe to deport its own Jews to the death camps in Nazi Germany. It is the only country that set up internment camps for the Spanish people fleeing the Spanish Civil War. So France has a long history of persecuting ethnic or religious minorities, and even to persecute religious communities. The Catholics after the French Revolution were massacred by, as a matter of fact. So I don't want to say Muslims are experiencing what others experienced before them, but France throughout its history did not and does not like strong identities. So that's why today you see this hysteria surrounding Muslims and the incapacity to speak of them as regular citizens who pay their taxes, go to sports, or take part in everyday life.
Well, I think, in every country on the planet, you have some bad actors. So we had Charlie Hebdo. You had this recent beheading of a teacher. You're going to have bad actors. Here in the United States, we had a young man who decided to shoot up a mall. Do you put everybody of his ethnicity or of his religion in the same pot? Of course not. Why would you do that?
Well, in France, what is even in most Western countries, anytime there is a terrorist attack happening on their soil, they turn to Muslims and hold them accountable for them. First, we have to remember that those terrorist groups are based abroad. They don't come from the wider Muslim communities. Second, when they hit those countries, they make no difference between non-Muslims and Muslims. During the Charlie Hebdo shootout, they killed a Muslim police officer on camera. During the hostage situation in the Jewish supermarket, it was a Muslim person who saved over 10 or 15 people because he hit them in that cold room. But the problem is, nobody wants to see that. And they want to have this, black and white approach to events, that we white people are the victims and those, Muslims are the enemy. The problem is the first victims of terrorism are by far, very far, Muslims. And again, we wish that the government would acknowledge that when they come and hit us here, they make no difference. The problem is when we have even in a national, day of mourning, and when we should be, sticking together in the face of, a terrorism, the government and the media, they still make a difference and say, no, this is our day of sadness and Muslims cannot be part of us.
Well, do you think, as some writers in some of the articles I've read, that this is all a political ploy? And do you think that the Senate, I know it now has to go to the parliament, do you think it will pass and bringing I guess more moderate conservatives together with the right wing?
I mean, the harm has already been done because this has again created a climate of national Islamophobia, carried by policymakers, the opposition, and the media. And whether these measures make it through the lower chamber of parliament, the National Assembly, and through the Constitutional Council, which is the last validator, the harm is already done, and now Muslims are again the enemy and the devil from within the French nation. And the fact that we even dared to legislate once more on the bodies of Muslim women, to prohibit setting up organizations, private schools, prohibiting the burkini, etc., the government and the so-called opposition confirmed one thing, that if you are a Muslim woman in France and you dare to wear a headscarf, you are basically sentenced to a social death sentence. You can't go to school, you can't work, you can't practice any kind of form of sports, you can't even set up an organization. And today they are even banning, hold tight, foreign flags. So if you are an Algerian getting married and you carry the Algerian flag or the Moroccan flag or the Senegalese flag, they called for the banning of those foreign flags. How more can we do to make this country look ridiculous to the rest of the world?
Wow. I hope that doesn't spread. I think it will, but I'm still praying that it doesn't. But how does this look? And I agree with you wholeheartedly that the damage has been done. So what is the way forward, or what do you see in the coming year or so?
Well, I mean, the responsibility now will be upon the shoulders of Muslims. They will have to resist like any other community has before them. They will have to show steadfastness. They will have to uphold their rights and stop fearing this government crackdown. The snowball effect is already there, and these prohibitions are not new. They are being done for the past 25 years. So now that will require better community organizing, taking back the narrative, and standing for your own rights. And again, make it in the interest of the government to stop this repression.
Well, let me ask you this, just for our audiences here. When France claims laïcité, what exactly does that mean? Does it mean that religious people have no rights?
Well, this is again part of the French propaganda and the so-called French exceptionalism. Laicity is nothing, special. It is just the separation of church and state. And France was not the first one to implement it. Mexico did before France. So it is just the 1905 law that was passed to separate religion and government and to keep religion from interfering in government affairs and vice versa. And what is happening today is a clear violation of laïcité because the government is meddling in
meddling.
affairs.
Keep going. Tell us some more.
Yeah. So
it's not supposed to meddle.
Well, if the government is not supposed to meddle because the laïcité keeps it from doing so, why do they blame Muslims for violating laïcité when the French government itself is nominating religious leaders, interfering in charity elections, interfering in mosque management, interfering in Muslim communities, and even saying we are going to promote the brand of Islam that we like? No, that's none of your business. It's a secular state. You stay in your government affairs and you let communities deal with their own business. So anytime you hear this is a French thing, you Americans don't understand, just say please. Laïcité has nothing exceptional. It is separation of church and government. And what Emmanuel Macron is doing today is not only violating laïcité, but also violating the French constitution, which doubles down on the non-interference of the government in community affairs.
Wow. We're supposed to have a separation of church and state. Of course, we don't. I don't know where it went or if it was ever really there, but I am just curious as to how religious communities, because I know for a fact that there are girls' Jewish schools that they cover their heads. So this is clearly an attack on the Muslim community because there's no mention of the rest. And I don't know how I know how we fight that, but I don't want you to go to jail in the meanwhile, okay? Just stay out of jail so you can keep pushing and informing us. But let me give you the last few minutes to tell us what you want us to know, both about what you're doing and what this issue portends for the Muslim community there.
Well, I really thank you for that. I'm turning to your viewers in America and seek the support to give a voice to what's happening in France, to the people who are organizing against this repression, to share resources. I'm not afraid of saying it. Organizing requires funding, requires training, requires having the proper solidarity networks, and we desperately need that. And if people think this is only a French thing, we will take interest the day it happens and then move on to the next thing, just keep something in mind, that France is a laboratory of Islamophobia, that anything that happens here is going to come to America.
Everywhere else.
Or later, there are multiple anti-Muslim relays in America, and now it's upon people in America who care about Islamophobia to help support the resistance here, so you won't have to deal with it over there.
That's well said. I'm just wishing and thinking about, we have an organization here that fights against Islamophobia across the country called CARE. I'm sure you've heard of it.
Oh, yeah, I'm in touch with them, yeah.
You need to have a French CARE. And that would help with the resources. And I'm sure you have folk there who are trained in French law to just get on board. It has been my pleasure Yasser, to speak with you today on what is a very important issue. And although France has the issue with the church and the forest growing in the middle of the church and all this other stuff, it takes the time to target Muslims. So I can't thank you enough and hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you for having me.
Back to you, Hena Zuberi.
Thank you, Dr. Amina. We'll be right back after the break with our next analysis segment. Stay tuned.
Our fellow Americans.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans.
And soon, they will be available to everyone.
The science is clear. These vaccines will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
They could save your life.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
That's the first step to ending the pandemic and moving our country forward. It's up to you.
They took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. There's a struggle to control the narrative about the George Floyd trial and what the conviction actually means. For answers, let's go to Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid for an in-depth analysis. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you, Hena. We'll be talking about the aftermath of the murder trial of Floyd. George Floyd was murdered by a knee, which you and I have seen. That knee has not been lifted from our throats yet. What is the future? Can America change? While those verdicts were being read, people of color were still being harassed and shot at. What is the future? Are we going to learn for some lessons which will last for our country in liberating people from it? To discuss all of that, we have an organizer. Netfa Freeman is an organizer for Pan-African Community Action. Welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Thank you for having me.
And tell me, what is your reaction, how you felt when the verdict was read?
Mm-hmm. We've been preparing for this verdict. It wasn't really very unexpected. I think that a lot of people thought it was not to be realized because of the history, the long history of not only police repression, but the accompanying impunity of the police. But this was a little different. And we saw so in the uprisings, what we consider the George Floyd uprisings last summer, that precipitated the decision to charge, to prosecute Derek Chauvin. Most of the times, the police aren't even prosecuted. They don't go to trial. The prosecutors, because they worked hand in hand with the police, often they might have a grand jury or something like that, but it doesn't go this far. Once it doesn't go as far as the initial decision to prosecute Derek Chauvin, which means also, if we're looking at this not from the standpoint of the isolated incident of George Floyd, while we even are relieved and feel good about the family being able to get this minimum level of justice, we also know this is a structural problem with the United States that goes all the way back, as a settler colony, to the establishment, the destruction and genocide, attempted genocide of the indigenous people, the enslavement of Africans. And so the police come out of that and are there to enforce that. So this structural problem, we knew that this was an attempt to basically give a concession to the people, because those uprisings scared them. They even forced, if you remember, it forced the president of the United States at the time, Donald Trump, to go into a bunker. And then all of the media, media efforts to make a distinction between what they could refer to as good protesters and bad protesters. This move was to avert the rising dissatisfaction and the crisis of illegitimacy, that this government is facing in terms of meeting the needs of working class, particularly working class Black and brown people in this country.
So in 2020, not a single police officer was convicted because of murder. Not a single one. So 2021 has one. And that you're attributing not to a systemic change, but because of a whole movement throughout the country, but throughout the globe. I mean, there were demonstrations around the world also. Right. So do you think that movement will be satisfied that easily by one conviction?
It shouldn't be. We hope not. We hope that we're learning from our lessons, that this is not about putting individual police officers on trial and letting the same structures, this corrupt judicial system, which often gives the impunity to them, finding justice through there. That's not justice. The justice that we need to have is a shift of power, a power shift to the disenfranchised, people, working class Black and brown people of this country, and there's a class element to it, that are subject to the repression and the exploitation of capitalism, white supremacy, and patriarchy that characterizes the U.S. This characterizes the U.S. So it's not only this officer in 2020 wasn't prosecuted, so many. The statistic right now is that at least one, maybe even up to 3 people are killed by police officers in this country, or vigilantes or security guards in this country per day. And so we might see the high profile ones, even during the Chauvin trial. Dante Wright was killed. Even during the riots, in fact, what we've referred to as the rebellions, there was police assaults on people. There was a young white man who was standing up for Black Lives Matter and the cause of Black Lives Matter, and put his body on the line, that the police came and supposed attempt, I can't remember, this is Kenosha.
Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Right, Wisconsin. And they assassinated him. The police assassinated him right in front of his doorstep. And these are the kind of things that the people like, the president of the United States, Biden and Harris, won't talk about. They don't talk about that part. Their attempt here is to control the narrative, to therefore control the movement, to guide the movement to it. So we have to be for things that are talking about self-determination and power, recognizing the people who are most impacted as colonized people. In a settler colonial situation, we're colonized, Black and brown people. And if once we realize that we're colonized, then we also know that the only solution to that situation is what should be considered decolonization, not concessions like, seeing a police officer arrested and then prosecuted, because they can throw a person under the bus. This is what happened with Derek Chauvin. They decided they had to throw him under the bus because the people would stand for nothing less. And once they do that, they're trying to I'm sorry. They once they do that, they're trying to maintain the system. They're trying to keep the system intact, and they want to distract us from what the ultimate goal should be.
So tell me, is there any reform which is going through the Congress? Are there some elements which you think will improve the system? Because on one side, you're talking about decolonization and power shift. That seems like a big revolutionary process. This country it doesn't look like going to go through a process. In the meantime, there will be another 1,000 people who will be murdered by police on the streets. So is there any interim thing which you think is a possibility? Any reform in which citizens will be able to have oversight on what police does and how police behaves?
No, the reforms won't do it. The system is proving that, and so the reforms are designed to fend off the radical transformation, the revolution that is just needed. And so that's not going to do it. Those things are band-aid techniques. The police will continue to kill and brutalize us because it is their only way to control. They serve they're an extension of the state. The problem is not just the police. It's that they're an extension of, and the state is here to maintain the status quo. And so we have to fight for. So, and if we think about the history, history is proven in the United States. All of the gains, even the major concessions in terms of the workers' rights in this country, the 5-day work week and 8-hour work day, is attributed to the Haymarket rebellions and riot, the civil rights bills and those kind of things, where the what they call the long hot summer in 1967 and the Kerner Commission report, that they went and did that and to find out how to do, and so they made those gains because people made the country ungovernable. And when you think about the Stonewall riot, all these kind of things are the things that really make change. Other than that, this country is insistent and what we call belligerent in maintaining the status quo and not giving self-determination and rights to those who are oppressed in this country.
So what are the possibilities of a movement of that magnitude which you're talking about, the historic civil rights movement, people are standing up, and do you see?
Yes. Well, I think we in it right now. I mean, it's not just the civil rights movement. If we think about the trajectory of this movement, and it can only go one way because the country, I mean, we have neoliberalism, austerity, which is the insistence of the powers that be. But if we think about the time, remember the young man Michael Brown, and then what gave rise to Black Lives Matter, the demands. So as the movement matures, the demand at that time were things like police cameras, body cams, and different things. Civilian review boards, which are powerless things. But more and more now, the thing is evolved to something like defunding the police, abolish the police, a much more formative the demand. But we have to also realize how do we accomplish that? And I think organizing more, combining organization with mobilization. Like if we look at what happened now, I mean, they only prosecuted Derek Chauvin because of the unplanned rebellions. If we organize and we have planned action and sustained action, combining mobilizations with organization on the ground, where people are harnessing the resources we have to struggle for our survival, because we have a pandemic that's the government's not meeting its needs. There's austerity, there's unemployment. If we have to harness our resources on a grassroots level, because the government won't do it. In other words, we have to organize ourselves, community assemblies, and what we call for is community control of the police in PACA, which means that the people have the democratic collective right to have binding decisions on any force that is deployed, officers for public safety in the community. In other words, they're not going to be protecting and serving the big businesses and the property and be their bosses be the politicians, but the people will be their bosses, and we will be able to hire, fire, establish priorities, duties, policies around the police. The people themselves organize, and so we would kick out what this can be done statutorily, because we're calling for a ballot initiative. We're not calling for politicians to implement some reform. That we would actually use the mechanisms of power, of democratic mechanisms that are available, which we're distracted from using, like referendums and ballot initiatives, and call for community control over not just police, but other things. But it starts with the police because they're the front line of protecting the system and the repression that we're experiencing.
Thank you so much. Netfa Freeman is an organizer with Pan-African Community Action. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Back to you, Hena.
Thank you, Imam Mujahid. That's all from our Washington studios tonight. Keep watching Muslim Network TV. For more, visit our website, muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.
Special thanks to our official supporter, Zagat Foundation of America.